and people feel misled and frankly lied to, have two consequences the next election. First of all, people just won't vote. They'll go a plague on all your houses, I'm not going to bother. Or secondly, they'll vote for extremist populist parties who haven't got any solutions. There aren't many people who want to stick their hand up, who are super competent, really bright, could make lots more money in the private sector. If I put certain people in charge of a business, they will turn that business around. Our public services are getting bigger, not smaller. We are getting on the back of basically three major shocks. The 2008 financial crisis, which hit everybody. Brexit, which was a shock in many shapes and forms. And thirdly, this sort of COVID/Ukraine war. Those three things have really affected this country and our capability to punch above our weight. We're ruled by a rule of law that makes it incredibly expensive and difficult for government to act quickly. If people have got no money and no access to finance, inevitably they drift into crime. The great Edmund Burke said,
Yes.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. If you want to change the world, look in a mirror.
Guy, how are you?
I'm all good.
Alex Gladstein connected us.
Indeed.
He's a
great man.
Great man, a hero of mine. I don't spend enough time with him, and when I do, he always ensure I meet some of them. I've met some of the most incredible people because of him. So when he was like, "You've got to meet Guy and talk to Guy," I was like, "I'm in." A friend of Alex is a friend of mine.
Well, he and I spent some time together, and he absolutely blew me away as well. And I think also there's a lot in the world, whether it is Bitcoin, geopolitical influence, how it is you finance third world countries, how it is the economy is going to be shaped over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, the growth of alternative currencies. He's the world leader on most of those sort of things.
Yeah.
But also he's at the nice juxtaposition between political realities and difficulties, but also practical implementation and solution to problems. Now, that's a very interesting world to be in.
Yeah, he's also, for me, he balances me, because when I drift a little bit too conservative, a little bit too populist, I lose a bit of my little bit of my empathy. I sometimes get a knock from Alex, and it's a useful knock. So no, I love the guy. I do want to talk a lot about the UK. I want to get more local, because I know your experience. There's a lot of things going locally for me. But where I wanted to start really is, because you experienced this, I think the nation is living through the regret now of replacing a number of Conservative MPs with Labour MPs.
Well, I think, listen, I don't want to diminish the 2024 general election result, because self-evidently the country voted for change, but I do think they were sold a pup. In other words, they were promised change without any consequences and any impact on themselves by a party that had a fantastic campaign to win the election, but no plan for power.
Yeah.
And I think that is a really dangerous thing, whether you see it in Bedford, in Northumberland, or anywhere, where you're marched up a hill that something is going to happen and that there'll be change without consequences, whether that's in your family, your business, or in the political environment. And the practical reality is that's just simply not the case. And people feel misled and frankly lied to. And that is a real problem for all of us, frankly, because I'm passionate about this country. I want my government to do well. I don't vote for Keir Starmer. I happen to think he's politically wrong, but he's someone I've known for a long period of time because he and I were lawyers together back in the day. And he's fundamentally a decent enough person. But I just think the problem is he is going to have two consequences the next election. First of all, people just won't vote. They'll go a plague on all your houses, I'm not going to bother. Or secondly, they'll vote for extremist populist parties who haven't got any solutions. But if you're far left or far right, it's very easy to say, oh, but if only we did this, the world will get better. All right. And that is complicated because however you dress it up, government is hard. However you dress it up, being in charge of stuff is difficult. It doesn't matter whether that's a business or a country or a cabinet. That's not simple stuff. And there are complications and problems that go to it. The problem is, though, if you have an election promising manifest change for the good, and then so patently don't deliver that, then that creates real problems for the cohesion of the country. And for politics, I'm a Democrat. I believe in democracy tremendously. And there's a nice line, which is, you don't only like democracy when you win. I have fought many general elections, most of which I won. And I had an ever-increasing majority leading up to 2024. I did have some very significant boundary changes that made it harder. So I acquired 15,000 largely Labour voting people from Newcastle. But at the same stage, I got swept. When a tsunami hits, lots of people get swept away.
Did you know it was coming?
I thought with about a week to go, it was going to be very tight. I then was deluged by Labour literature. Literally, my neighbour got 6 leaflets in 7 days from Labour Central Office, who spent hundreds of thousands of pounds to win the seat. And I was clearly outspent by them, but to a massive degree. That definitely had an impact.
I do like talking to ex-MPs because the tie's off, sleeves are up, they speak a bit more openly. But I've never actually asked them, what is it like losing a seat? Because you were MP for 14 years?
Yeah. So I won the seat in 2010.
Yeah.
Kept it at 2015, 2017, 2019. Lost it in 2024. The most important thing, my glass is always half full. I've had a brain tumor. I've twice nearly lost my life. So my life is very, very positive, and I am an optimist at everything.
Okay.
So most of all, you feel gratitude for having had the opportunity to serve in the mother of all parliaments for 14 years in the most beautiful part of the world. Apologies, Bedford, but it definitely Northumberland is better. And bluntly, that is an amazing thing. Losing that is a kick in the teeth, no question. But it is also, it's democracy. And you're sanguine about it. You're not defined by your job in this world. You're defined by your relationships with yourself. You're defined by your relationship with your family. You also have to look back and say, did I actually use the time? Because all political careers end in failure in some shape or form, okay? And that's the practical reality of it, okay? And did I use the time I had in office to do good things? Did I use it to try and promote my constituents' aspirations, dreams, and needs? Or did I squander that? By and large, I was able to answer both of those very, very positively.
Is there a comeback, or is that as MP in the past?
So I'm lucky enough to have, courtesy of the wonders of IVF and an amazing wife, 2 very small children.
Okay.
So Marina was only born in August of last year.
Wow.
I know. I'm obviously only 26, so it's really easy. So I have 2 small children who I'm now trying to bring up and provide for. If you think I've got bags under the eyes, that's because I did the morning feed this morning quite early. Thank you. But I'm also doing a lot of very, very interesting work as well. Some of it is in this country, some of it's abroad. I'm helping certain people in sort of retirement services, pensions, financial services. I'm doing some really interesting stuff. I've got a startup I'm helping. So we'll just see. The answer is, I don't think you should ever say never to politics, but it's also not up to me. You have to be reselected by your association or whoever is, running the particular local show. They may say, look, you're too old, too fat, too yesterday's man for us. Or alternatively, they may say, yes, please, but the electorate say, no, thank you.
Yeah, I'm at the other end. My kids are 21 and 15, and I'm looking down the barrel of my kids not wanting to spend time with me anymore and thinking, what do I do with my time? It's an interesting time. Okay, let's talk much more locally. I've been desperately trying to help my local town. Indeed. I've been trying to get under the skin of what I think the problems are. So I've identified problems and thought I knew what the solutions were. But the more I dig, the more I feel like our local council has essentially no chance of success. They are if they're in a race, they're heavily weighted down, and every time they get up, get ahead, they're weighted down again. I've got it here. We had Ben Habib in earlier, and I mentioned it to him, but I've been looking at all the acts of legislation which local councils have to follow. Housing Act 1996, Homelessness Reduction Act 2017, Local Government Finance Act 1992. There's pages of this stuff.
Of course there is.
And as I got into it, I realized there is so much legislation, there's so much pressure on local councils, but there's little leverage in terms of how they raise money, that essentially our local council is on a constant wafer-thin budget, which gets thinner and thinner, and with little ability to do proactive things. It's responding to the wants and desires of central government and the legislation of central government to provide people with everything they need in life, anything from schooling to policing. And there just isn't enough money anymore. And so I'm watching the disintegration of my town and seeing the council really not having a chance to fix it.
So there's a couple of points I'd push back on that.
Okay.
So the first two is that the big explosion in council spend has been on social care,
yes,
and special education needs.
Yes.
And both of those are statutory requirements. And there's many arguments, and we could fill up a 2-hour podcast on why the SEND provision has expanded massively, particularly in a post-COVID world. But there's no doubt that it has, and that all governments and all local authorities are struggling with that. There's no doubt. Secondly, the social care for adult social care demands are high, and the failure to institute a insurance system Dilnot style report to pay for greater degree of adult social care is a real difficulty, because the demands on the local authority are harsh. So you've got a double demand that is clearly growing massively. That is big. There are some local authorities, Wandsworth is the famous example, who are able to run a very tight ship and a very professional ship, even in these difficult circumstances. So I don't think it's that this is an impossible task, but it is very, very difficult. That is without a shadow of a doubt. How they then maximize revenue, and some have, attempted to go into commercial real estate and things like that, some not very successfully on that, is difficult again. But at the same stage, you're not wrong in that trying to provide local services in a fiscally difficult time, however we got here, where money is tight and demand is exceeding, where you've got statutory requirements, forget about all the other things you want to do, is very difficult. You could make legitimate arguments. I have been a local councillor. I've been a member of parliament for 14 years. I've been a government minister, not in the Department of Communities and Local Government, but I know it very well. And I've been responsible for pension funds, which is part of the local government for a long period of time. And I can say that, they can be run better, and there are inspirational leaders who've done fantastic jobs. You look at some of the mayors who are doing stellar jobs, whether that's Ben Houchin at Teesside, Andy Street I thought was incredible at West Mids, and some of the Labour ones are doing pretty well as well. So you can do it better, but it's very hard.
Finding good people who can do that is hard as well.
So here's the thing. You and I are about to discuss why you should or should not get into politics. But bluntly, here's the bottom line. There aren't many people who want to stick their hand up, who are super competent, really bright, could make lots more money in the private sector, don't have responsibilities, who either want to run for national politics or local politics. There are some very good people, but you're trying to get really good people. Andy Street was a good example. The man, ran a FTSE 100 company. I think he's the only FTSE 100 company elected politician we've had since Archie Norman, who ran Asda. There are not many of these people who go, do you know what? I'm going to give up my 5 million plus a year job
and to get yelled at.
To get yelled at in Tesco's as I go and do the weekly shop.
Yeah, it's tough. It's what did they do in Wandsworth? What is this? I haven't read about this.
So Wandsworth Council very famously ran a phenomenally tight ship. They had really good people. It was a Conservative run council, and literally there's a famous street in a place called Southfields in southwest London, I should say, where on one side of the road, council tax hypothetically is like £1,000 a year, and it's really, really well kept up. On the other side of the road, which was not the Wandsworth Council, that was about £3,000 a year council tax and really, really poorly run. So good people can turn around good local authorities. It is not a, it's a bit like a business. If I put certain people in charge of a business, they will turn that business around, but not everybody can do that.
I've been through the budget of the Bedford Council. I've spent time with people who worked there, and I don't see any room for manoeuvre That's the problem. I see no leeway, no opportunity.
Yeah.
I can see things you can do in the local town. I mean, I would love every Friday, Saturday night for them to close the high street for traffic, to allow all the restaurants and bars to put outside seating, to have food trucks, to have late night shopping and put on cultural events to bring people into the town. I think you can do things like that, and that would be good for the town.
Yeah, correct.
But in terms of the budgets required for policing, security, other proactive things, it just seems to be no money left. And actually, there's less and less money. I did a Freedom of Information request on emergency housing. The budget has gone up from $7.5 million in 2022-23 to $18 million last year. I mean, that's a massive rise in 2 years, and it's getting higher.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're right about lots of this. The policing budget is slightly separate because that comes in from different budgets from the Home Office and the Police and Crime Commissioner and things like that. But there is no doubt that all local authorities up and down the country are cash-strapped and are struggling with the demand. How they then dice that particular cake is up to them. And they have to clearly bear down on cost. They really, really have to run their administration very, very tightly. And then they really have to focus on what the core products are. And there are certain things that they can do. So, for example, Bedford is a place that is now becoming very pro-housing, all right? And clearly that has a great commercial benefit for the local authority.
No, that's not true. So I looked into this and I found out it's not. Because of these social housing requirements, every new housing project costs the council money. They lose money.
Okay, I'd really, really want to dive into that. Yeah. And I would really question whether a local authority, notwithstanding a need and a desire for that, could do things differently. So let me give you an example. In a regeneration context, you can take some local authority or national government money, and you can look at what they did in West Midlands, where they leveraged some national fund, but then they partnered up with pension funds who love doing long-term housing build, right? And you can turn about £100 million worth of state-sponsored money into about £500 to £700 million if you do the right deals and the right opportunities. And then you can get commercial development, retirement homes, different type of delivery. Certain companies, not naming any individuals, but Legal & General did it very successfully and partnered up with local authorities very successfully to create building by alternative means for local people, which is not state-sponsored, also covers your social housing need. There are ways of doing this. There really are.
Okay, I'll have to dig into that further. But are we fundamentally approaching this the wrong way? Have we architected an economy which means we're really living like beyond our means constantly, and feels like people refer to it as a managed decline? I'm careful around the use of that word, but are we allowing a slow death by 1,000 cuts to our towns and our cities because we've just got the structure of our country entirely wrong, both economically, legally?
The humble bee, a keystone species crucial to the survival of Earth's inhabitants. Here's how things would look if bees vanished. And here's how they'd look if humans vanished. But imagine if instead we became a keystone species by doing things the right way, by taking responsibility for our actions and becoming the solution. Iron mines the world's most responsible currency the right way. Because the future depends on it.
So, I mean, that's not a short question. No. It's not at all broad. So let me
take your time.
let me do that in bite-sized chunks. So firstly, are we in a managed decline? Are we economically less powerful than we were? In my view, probably we are. And there are a whole number of reasons for that, in that we have first world welfare, but a economy that is struggling. Productivity since 2008 has struggled. There's no question GDP growth has struggled. I remember being just before COVID as the economy was really picking up. And I thought for the first time, we've really turned a corner. And I thought in a sort of post-Brexit world where there'd been that sort of Brexit shock to the system, I could feel it really beginning to pick up, and you could see it in terms of businesses. And then COVID hit us. Then the Ukraine war hit us. And there have been a number of massive shocks that whoever's in government, you can look at what's happened to France, Germany, US, would really, really struggle with. And we are all paying the price of paying for COVID, whether rightly or wrongly. We maxed out the corporate and national credit card on that, paying for the Ukraine war, paying for the energy crisis, paying for certain things. Germany has it way worse because they were 98% dependent on Russian oil and gas, and they've obviously had to reinterpret themselves totally, and now are having to invest in defense in a way that nobody else was previously. So there is decline because, frankly, all global economies are struggling, with the exception of some new countries like Singapore, India, other countries like that, who are clearly galloping up the GDP tables. So that is an issue that we have to deal with. And we have legacy obligations and statutory requirements that mean we are treating our citizens in a particular way. And whether that is citizens who only just come here or citizens who have been here for 50, 70 years and we looked after in retirement, we have an NHS system that spends the best part of 50% of its entire budget on the last few years of individuals' lives. Now,
I didn't know that.
That if you drill down onto the NHS, you and I don't really use the NHS.
Nope.
I mean, I have to because occasionally I needed someone to take a chainsaw to my head and
I read about that, by the way.
It was quite punchy. I'm not that keen on chainsaws anymore. So clearly, it's an amazing facility for emergency requirements, but at the same stage, we then have a system that looks after the elderly in a fantastic way, but in a very expensive way, and that is really, really, really expensive. It is the biggest employer in this country by a country mile. That our public services are getting bigger, not smaller, as our productivity is struggling and our GDP growth is struggling. That those two things do not necessarily meet, and we have a Labour government who are clearly very keen on that. Now, that is their choice. They are the elected government of the country, but that makes life very complicated. Now, so that deals with your where are we now situation, and we are getting on the back of basically three major shocks: the 2008 financial crisis, which hit everybody, Brexit, which was a shock in many shapes and forms, and thirdly, the sort of COVID/Ukraine war. Those three things have really affected this country and our capability to punch above our weight. Now, you then look at the sort of the way the laws are constructed. So my last job was at Transport, which does link to Bedford, the A1 and East-West Rail and various other things. So my last job was at Transport, where I was trying to utilize money from the HS2 budget that we'd cancelled. So Rishi came in and cancelled the second leg of HS2. Quite right too. He cancelled it and said, we're going to spend this on local roads and infrastructure and other things like that. So one of which of the things I signed off was the Black Cat roundabout on the A1 and various other things. All right.
By the way, they should have...
Which should have been done 30 years ago.
Well, but they, about a decade, was it a decade ago? They changed the Black Cat roundabout. They changed the markings.
All of these things.
And it's like, and now they're doing it again. It's like, I found it's a £1 billion project.
So we could, to construct stuff in this country is really expensive. Yeah. Okay, that is definitely the case. But every single one of my road projects was mired in litigation. Genuinely, there was one particular case which went to the Supreme Court, based around the A47, but around a bunch of other roads as well. Trust me, I mean the A66, A1, loads of other, all linked to climate change, and all linked to, can you build stuff in this country if it has a detrimental impact to the local environment and climate? And eventually we managed to get the legislation through. But by the way, that took, and some of the cases through, that took about 5 years of litigation. Everything was mired in delay because of that. And if I'm building something, I have to buy the land to do it all. And you have what's called land that's on that is set aside for it, and just so difficult to build stuff. So we are ruled by a rule of law, and I speak as a barrister. I speak as someone who's a judicial review barrister. I represented government on multiple occasions. We're ruled by a rule of law that makes it incredibly expensive and difficult for government to act quickly. Whether that's local authority or national government, there's no question whatsoever. If you don't resolve that, you will then end up with real problems. And by the way, that just adds to the cost of everything.
By the way, I don't think the Black Cat roundabout work is required. I mean, I use that roundabout
everything to upgrade the A1 is a good thing.
But I use it 2 to 3 times a week. And yes, in one particular direction, it's annoying because sometimes there's a 5-minute wait. But I don't know if £1 billion upgrade is required at that moment. That's my view. It's just it's like this East-West Rail. It could be useful, but I feel like we're at a time where we shouldn't be spending money.
Well, we've got to live within our means, but also there is a great danger. At the same time as you are trying to live within your means, you have to be key in targeting your projects for infrastructure growth and economic progress. Now, if you did nothing, then you would merely live within your means, and budgets would always be, people would always say, oh, but we need to spend it over here, and you spend it over here. You know, Margaret Thatcher was the last, and George Osborne to a lesser degree, were the last two prime ministers and chancellors who genuinely made real efforts to pay down our debt and really made an effort to try and live within our means. It is very difficult. Every single country on the planet is running a deficit. That is not tenable longer term. So you have to then identify which are the projects you need to do. The area you are part of, that is a massive growth area for jobs and productivity growth, all right, on a multitude of levels. And you may say, oh, well, this particular improvement to the A1 or the A47 or upgrades to M1 or East-West Rail are not necessarily important on their own, but it is part of a wider plan. And slightly, you look at the way that China or Germany in particular create large hubs of economic infrastructure and prosperity. And how you do that is you have good connectivity, you have in multiple ways, obviously, rail and road if you can do it. And you genuinely try and say, this area is going to be an area that will really prosper and grow, which, by the way, your part of the world is clearly going to prosper and grow, notwithstanding the town centre is struggling. One pushback, I would say, the lesson my mum taught me, which is, if you want to change the world, look in a mirror. And so each and every person has to take a long, hard look about, how do I spend my money? Do I buy on Amazon? I boycott them. I don't go near Amazon. I want to support a local bookshop. I don't want to support
I'll read something to you.
So you try and change the way you live your life, and then try not to spend all your money in a supermarket on out of town, and support your local butcher, support your local fishmonger, support your local whatever, and try and then also live your life so that you know where your kids are when they're 15, 16, you know what they're doing, you take responsibilities for those sort of things. The more that changes, the more your community changes.
So I posted on Facebook this morning that we will make Bedford a thriving market town if the people of Bedford come together, refuse to accept decline, and support local business. If the people of Bedford continue to complain about the town but give all their money to retail parks, supermarkets and online vendors, we will get the town we deserve. And one of the things I'm trying to communicate locally in Bedford is, and I'm doing it myself, every week I go in and I'll mooch around the shops, spend £100, is trying to communicate, yes, it might be convenient to go to Tesco, but if you go to the local butcher, you're providing jobs locally, probably supporting a local farm.
Correct.
If you go to the local coffee shop.
And the quality's better.
Yeah, and if you support a local coffee shop, maybe that money goes to, I always say, maybe some daughter's ballet lessons rather than Starbucks shareholders. But trying to get people to think like that and change their lifestyle is really hard.
Oh, yeah. And I was the MP when we had what was called the horse meat scandal in beef.
Yes.
And my local Tesco put up a sign saying, we cannot 110% justify that this beef is not contaminated with horse meat. So we have discounted it to £1 a packet, sold out within an hour.
Of course. They don't care.
The great British public, to a certain extent, are interested in the cheapest of prices, and to a certain extent are interested in convenience. Changing that is really hard. We all shop at supermarkets. Mm-hmm. Pretend we don't is naive, but at the same stage, you just can't do it all the time. You have to try and make time to try and live your life in a different way, or abdicate yourself from having the opportunity to criticize. That's why I always say to everybody, run for political office. You run for council. You run for this, because then you'll see how difficult it is and how really complicated it is and how you've got to try and drive forward change is a struggle. It's like you are Sisyphus. You are marching a large rock uphill every single day. You turn around and you do the same again the next day. It shouldn't be like that, but trust me, everywhere that is the case. Yeah. You could speak to Narendra Modi or a couple of dictators in China and other places, and they'd still say government is hard.
Yes, I've thought about it myself. I've thought about running for mayor. I'm not going to do it. I've thought about running.
Why not? Why wouldn't you?
I think I can be more effective outside of politics, locally. I think the problem I fear, and I'm already seeing it, when I announced this private security that I'm paying for in the town, that there's pushback against it. And it's ideological pushback, but it's pushback. As soon as you become a mayor, unless you run independent, your only real chance of winning locally is with a party. You become tainted by being with that party. And if somebody hasn't voted for that party, they will disagree with everything you're doing. So I think not being aligned to a party and just being a local businessman, investing and trying to spark change, you've got less of that kind of ideological pushback.
So you're right and you're wrong. So of course, you're right that if you haven't got any political ties, you're not bound to any ideology. You can say, I speak to everybody, et cetera, that gives you a freedom as well. You're not bound by, laws and obligations necessarily, provided you don't break the law yourself. So you're right in the sense that gives you great freedom and you can intervene much quicker than you can as a politician. All right. So park that a second. But you're also very wrong. The great Edmund Burke said,
yes.
The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. And eventually, I'm going to prophesy, you will get fed up and you will go, you do what?
I'm already fed up.
Well, but you will get fed up as well, because some of the levers of office really make a difference, right?
Okay.
And your ability to change things with political power, whether that is as a member of parliament, whether that is a local councillor, or whether that is as the mayor, or police and crime commissioner even, are massive, genuinely massive. I could give you dozens of stories of individual things that I've changed for the positive in Northumberland, or other MPs around the country have changed, or frankly, mayors can do incredible things and be transformational. So I gave you the example of Andy Street in the West Midlands, who transformed the West Midlands. Ben Houchin is transforming a small area. Teesside is only 750,000 people. It's not Yorkshire, or it's not, Greater London. So it's really hard to change only 750,000 people. Is transforming it. There's no question he is. And with those things come great power, and your capacity to change politics, change housing, change how it is you spend the local taxpayers' money, because obviously all council tax comes from all local council taxpayers, is massive. And you could do great things. And here's the thing. I suspect as you get into your dotage, as you know, you are coming up to 47, and therefore you've got, by my reckoning, you've got another 47 years to go. So as you get into your dotage, you probably will go, I really wish I had actually run for office, because I could then really have said, I've tried everything. Because at the moment, what you're trying is, doing all the normal things, growing up, having children, making money, living your life, enjoying your life to the best of your abilities, living your life as if it was the last day is tomorrow, and also making a massive difference locally. But there is one thing that you're not doing, which, if you're as passionate, which I know you are, about your community and changing it, and if you're utterly committed to that community, you will eventually reach the conclusion, which you have in your own mind, but you just won't admit it, which is, if I want to do this, I have to go all in. And all in means I have to try and at least run for office, because if they reject that, that's fine. You can then have a separate conversation whether you run for an independent. By the way, an independent mayor was once elected for Bedford, as you know.
Yes.
Or you pick a political party. Andy Street was a extremely centrist Conservative. Most people would say I'm to the left of the centre of politics, and I'm probably the most cross-party Conservative everybody knows. And or you can be way more robust and, be on the reform end of the spectrum. With apologies, I didn't mean it in the spectrum sense. But you got to make those choices. It's not impossible to be elected as an independent. It's harder. There's no doubt it is harder, but it is not impossible in any shape whatsoever. And also make your own weather.
Well, I'm doing that.
Yeah, that's my point, which is you're so you're Lady Macbeth. You're so far in this that you're now hesitating about the final step.
Well, but I also worry about how much time it will take up. What impact does that have on? I've got a football club to run and businesses to run. The role of a mayor appears to me to be a 12-hour, 7-day-a-week job minimum. There's a lot to do. Yeah, look, I have considered it. I've thought about it a lot, Guy. I don't know. That's the honest answer.
So listen, I gave up all other earnings. Yeah. I stopped being a barrister. I stopped helping the family business. I stopped doing all the other stuff. I stopped my charitable work. Because being an elected representative is a honor and a privilege. And also, again, you're either pregnant or you're not. Now, you can become chairman of a football club rather than being hands-on, okay? You can hire good people to run your businesses, and other people seem to be able to do this. You wouldn't be the only successful person who went, it's really hard. How am I going to live the life I've been living? But then again, we have phases in our life.
Yeah.
All right. By that stage, Bedford will be in the Premier League. You could say the same about Wrexham, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Do the two lads run the football club? No, they don't. They're very involved and very supportive of it, but they don't run the football club. They've got perfectly normal lives and jobs and other things like that. There's plenty of ways to cook that particular cookie.
But based on your experience, I know it's a different role at MP and the mayor, but you talk about pushing this rock uphill. You were a local councillor as well. Are there obvious changes that we could make to make local central government work a lot better?
Yes.
Very obvious changes.
Yes. First of all, get really good people to run for those particular offices.
So that's very hard.
It is. So all the more reason why, if you want to change this, look in a mirror. All right. What you're asking for is well, surely we should change all the statutes and the legal obligations on councils and things like that. So it's not easy, but you can run things better and in a different way. There's no question you can. And there are plentiful examples of people who have done that. All right. Let me give you a couple of examples. If you're dissatisfied with how it is that you are people getting around and about, then look at what Andy Burnham's done in Manchester. That is now the most bus-friendly town in the country. It's the most cycling-friendly town in the country, city in the country. He has invested heavily in that to make transportation and cheap access for people going to and from work and living a more healthy life a number one priority, and has driven that through, by the way, against opposition. Social care is more complicated. Housing, I think there are fixes to that. I really do believe that. I would push back on your original, everything's got to be social housing going forward, because I just don't think that's right. And there are other providers. If you partner up with pension funds, if you partner up with alternative providers, if you use your Section 106 agreement properly, rather than just trying to build a few junctions, it is a really interesting use of that. And there are towns where they have done this in a unbelievably interesting way. Go to Aberfeldy in Scotland. Aberfeldy is a town, not a big town in Scotland, where they have enthusiastically embraced renewable energy. And so they have a lot of wind farms around Aberfeldy, a lot, genuinely at 50, okay? But however, that means they get Section 106 agreements, which for those who don't know what that is, that means you get a council citizen benefit of any economic development. They have used that to completely refurbish the cinema, make the high street amazing, do bus travel all over the place, and absolutely invested that in their local community. And that is a way of partnering up. And by the way, then are working on getting renewable energy to the community. And by the way, then if you're clever and you've got some water, you can do hydrogen. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you can then do. And that's a small town in Scotland. So I could give you big mayoralties or small towns in Scotland where people have done stuff in a very different way. We were going to talk about, for example, local community banks.
Yes, please. I really want to talk about that. And I'll tell you why. I set up this little fund in Bedford called the Bedford Future Fund. It has about £86,000 of donations, of which we've given about half away. Some to sports, creative kids, but also to little local entrepreneurs who want to start businesses who've got no access to capital.
Yep.
And so I'm really interested in this idea of a local community bank. Yeah, just tell me everything. So on this podcast, you are definitely hearing me talk about Bitcoin a lot. Well, why? We live in a really strange time with governments driving inflation with their reckless spending and endless money printing. There is a way out of this. There is a way to protect your money, and that is by stacking Bitcoin. I've made loads of shows about Bitcoin. You can go and research this. You can go and read the books. But the truth is, it is the hardest money ever created. If you are interested in protecting your financial future, it's time for you to get on the Bitcoin train. I've been stacking Bitcoin personally and through my businesses since 2017. It's protected me, it's secured my family's future, and it also strengthens all of my businesses. So if you want to start stacking Bitcoin, where do you do it? Well, for me, it's with Gemini. They're a fully licensed, full reserve exchange and custodian, so they give you a secure way for you to buy and own your Bitcoin. There's no risks and no funny business. So if you're serious about stacking Bitcoin the right way, head over to Gemini.com, which is GEMINI.com.
So when I first got the job in 2010, my banks were closing across my community, like all is happening up and down the country. Secondly, I had my football team, Newcastle, were sponsored by Wonga, a payday loan company.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, I had a lot of people in a particular state in Hexham who were taking money from loan sharks and from payday lenders, with inevitable consequence that you then drift into crime, drugs, all the usual problems. And there was no real savings facility. We didn't have a credit union. We didn't really have any community banking. And access to finance, particularly amongst low earners, was very, very limited. So we worked with the Church of England. I met with some people called the Sparkassen Group in Germany. So the Sparkassen has the Holy Trinity, which is the town hall, the church, and the local bank. And the local bank only lends to local people. Now, we set up a savings and loan. And my inspiration was Bailey Brothers from It's a Wonderful Life. And that's a savings and loan funded not by, Hong Kong, London shareholders. It's a cooperative. I persuaded a few key people to give me a capital base. Your 86,000 is a plentiful capital base. I had to go through the process of getting authorization. So I'm an FCA authorized bank that we created. I got some great people to help me, some ex-bankers and some very capable people. And I was very much the chairman rather than the hands-on person approving loans and stuff. We then very much invested in an online facility. So we made it really cheap and easy to run and a modern style bank. But at the same stage, it has thrived. We then reversed into another organization, took that over, and have gone from what started out as the Tyndale Community Bank, which was a little area of rural Northumberland I represented, to the Northumberland Community Bank. And it's doing really, really well.
So what are the range of people you're lending to and circumstances?
We lend to, I'm not involved as much as in anymore. I wasn't allowed to be when I was a minister, so I couldn't be 100% certain of it on the present day. But it's a beefed up credit union. So it is particularly to those people who are struggling to get access to finance and loans. Bear in mind, in this country, we have 11 million people who don't have £100 saved. This is in the UK. 11 million people don't have £100 saved. So when the car breaks down or the washing machine breaks down or they have they owe someone some money, they really struggle. So giving them an opportunity to have a loans book with a community lender who are extraordinarily cheap and giving them an opportunity to build up savings is fantastic. And we do crisis loans, but we also do larger loans as well. And the rules have been changed under the previous government. We changed the rules on community banks, so you can now do much bigger lending. And bluntly, it is a lender of last resort for communities who are struggling when there is nobody else to go. Because most banks won't lend to people who are low income. Most banks won't. I mean, there's an argument amongst the banks as to whether they do this sort of lending. It's a real struggle. And by the way, the bank probably doesn't exist, many of them even in big towns like Bedford, right? So it's really important that there is this alternative facility. You can then, as long as it's got a sufficient amount of finance, you can then move into other things. You can then move into housing. You can then move into development loans and things like that. You can have partnership with housing associations. You can do stuff in really clever ways. You can do partnership with some white label goods for housing associations so people don't get into tick when they're trying to buy a fridge or anything like that. It's really cool.
What's the total cost to set something like that up?
I did it with barely £25,000.
Oh, so I could just set this up?
Yes, you could. You'd need to get a FCA license in the end. You'd probably want to partner up with your local credit union. Off the top of my head, I don't know who your Bedford credit union is, but they will already be doing some sort of savings and loans in their local area. But at the same stage, you can beef it up. You can have a high street presence. There's no difficulty on that. And you just need some good people to help you do it.
Yeah, so
you could set up the Bedford Community Bank without a shadow of a doubt, or the Bedfordshire Community Bank.
And I could see that easily with tens of thousands of pounds. But
yes.
you've got infrastructure requirements, staffing requirements.
Yeah, not many. You'd be surprised how if you you are a alternative finance guru, and you live in an online world. You can set up an online processing system that means that it is a lot cheaper to run a bank than you think it is. That's why there's so many good challenger banks, because they're not got all this legacy paper and all that malarkey. And that's why the challenger banks are able to compete with the big banks.
But even if you're seeding with, say, £25,000-50,000, there's a staffing pressure to manage that business.
Yes, but it's all doable. It is genuinely all doable. We have one office in Ashington, which is probably the most deprived area in Northumberland, and they don't have more than 6 staff.
Now, but at the very start, when you first launched it, was it just you?
Myself, an amazing woman called Lauren Langton, who had done 30 years for Yorkshire Bank, and she now works for a company called Incuto, which provide a lot of the back office systems. A couple of really great people who understood banking in a way that I didn't necessarily did. I hadn't been a banker. And we were a fairly shoestring operation to start with. But it's very, very doable. And we worked with the church. So, they know a lot of the people. The launch party was with the Bishop of York. It was with my local Hexham Abbey. And a lot of the church vicars were saying that person needs help. These people need help, which they became our traveling salesmen in reality.
Right. And so you're trying to cut out the loan sharks.
Cutting out loan sharks, cutting out payday lenders. We've changed the law since then, so the Wongas of this world are not a problem. But at the same stage, you're trying to provide savings and loans. And why this matters is because if you do this right and properly, you will end up with a system whereby people are not drifting into crime, where they understand the power of savings. You can also do a great project, which I ran in Hexham, called Lifesavers. Really cool project for you. Lifesavers, where we set up banks in schools and we encourage children to save money. Of course, they would then go home to the mum and dad and go, "Mummy, do you have a savings account?" And if not, why not, obviously. And it mushroomed on a particular estate. We did it, whereby everybody started saving. And of course, you're not then getting into debt. You're not getting into the crisis loans. You're not getting into the worries. You don't necessarily drift into crime. You don't drift into bad behaviors. And so a combination of setting up a bank in Bedfordshire and the combination of doing lifesaver banks in schools, transformational.
I mean, I have the capital there to do this.
I know you do. I could do it.
I could do it tomorrow. it's the steps to do. Some other questions on that.
I can introduce you to some people who will help you on this journey and who are very, very cool and who can help you with. There's a bit of IT you need to get because you've got to have a platform that can do banking basically and have a web portal that you can go to and set up and do savings and loans assessments.
I'm wondering if we can run it from my cafe.
Yes, you probably could. Or you probably want the local authority or a nice charity to lend you a particular premises in the town, either next door to the cafe or very close.
There is 1-2 down that's vacant at the moment, and that would be ideal.
There is a way of doing it. There's no question whatsoever.
But it would have to be staffed, which could be a cost unless I could find a volunteer who wants to get involved. And
so we had lots of volunteers helping us. And again, people get behind. Every single person I know who's seen It's a Wonderful Life goes, I would like a Bailey Brothers bank or building society, as it was in his case. This is an old-fashioned building society. It's a savings and loan.
Default rates, how big a problem is that?
It exists, but it's not as bad and as everybody thinks. And also, bluntly, if you lend properly and then navigate people through, and you have proper old style banking, whereby the whole point of a Sparkassen, the German style local bank, is you lend to local people. If you're defaulting to a local bank, it's really much a bigger deal than if you're defaulting to HSBC. And people feel a lot more sense of pride, and there's more ownership. Because, bluntly, you're going to get investors who are local people. People who will say, I like the idea of this. I will give you and put £200 in to the Bank of Bedford because that, I think, is a good idea.
Okay, I want to do this, or at least look at
I can introduce you to some very cool people who will be able to do it. She'll have a heart attack that I'm naming her on your show, but Lauren Langton is the unquestioned person you need to speak to. You'll struggle to get a word in edgeways, but she is astounding.
Yeah, come on, Lauren, come to Bedford. No, I'm very interested in that because, look, I know there's an issue of access to capital. We are losing our high street banks. Also, high street banks they're not great to borrow from.
No, they're not, and they're not really interested in the old style local savings. I'll go one further. There's a really cool bank, which I really like, called Cambridge and Counties. So Cambridge and Counties was set up, and you talk about how can local authorities do things better. So Cambridge and Counties was set up in, obviously, Cambridge, and it utilizes one of the Oxford colleges, one of the Cambridge colleges, and part of the Cambridge pension reserves as a capital base, right? So that's your lending capital. It then was originally only lending for development to local businesses in the local area. And it was able to do so at slightly cheaper rates than the mainstream banks and mainstream mortgage companies. And they made a decent living, and it's on your doorstep. The Cambridge and Counties is just down the road for you. They are a really successful example, and the best example, in my view, of a Sparkassen lending to local people to create jobs and infrastructure in your local area in a way that also, by the way, makes them a decent living.
What were the size loans that was there a limit on the size loans you were doing?
Mine was small. Cambridge and Counties are chunky. They had a lot more money to play with. And you look at local authorities. So a local authority has a significant amount of reserves. How they utilize those reserves without squandering them, they've got to be careful about that. But how they use that as a capital base to then do lending on other things. Now, the obvious thing they try to do, for example, is they try to buy infrastructure, shopping centers and things like that, and then try to get a return in for the local community. Or they do housing. But they can also use them to create fiscal institutions, which is what Cambridge and Counties did. Go and have a chat to them. They are very cool people.
Yeah, I am very interested in this idea. And it's the kind of thing I'd want to probably move on quick, but I would need to find somebody who can run it because I wouldn't have the time. So how about credit checks and things like that? If these are people who are normally defaulting to, say, payday loan company, how are you credit checking people making decisions?
There's plenty of very nice online apparatus that you can purchase that'll do that all for you. Genuinely. And
you're making it sound so easy.
It's not easy, but it's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. It really isn't. And there's, you've got to have good IT. There's no question. But there are companies, bear in mind, this is already done by credit unions. So up and down the country, there are a number of credit unions who will be doing this. The beauty of a community bank is, A, you've got greater capability to do bigger and better things than a credit union. And secondly, in my view, putting the word bank is better than the word credit. That's got a bad connotation. Unions have got bad connotations nowadays. So a community bank is seen as something different. And it is seen as something in a very, it can grab attention of the local community in a way that the very nice credit union who's been around since God was a boy, but who doesn't have the infrastructure to support it. The other thing is this does require some capital fundraise to start with. Now, you and a few other people of like-minded souls could easily raise 100,000 as a capital base.
I can do it myself.
Exactly.
I mean, I've sat there on capital that I want to deploy into creating local businesses, but the problem is it's so hard to create a local business in the high street at the moment. It's just sat there. I want to open a pizza place and a burger restaurant, but I'm just so fearful because it's so hard right now. But this feels like almost like solid foundations.
Correct.
Prior to that.
Yes. You unquestionably, you can go down this route. And in my view, you then also have some peer pressure and you can then have discounting. So for example, the peer pressure is, have you put some of your savings in with the Bank of Bedford? Because that savings will then be utilized to loan money to the people who are struggling to get access to finance in your local community. Secondly, you can then say, if you invest in the Bank of Bedford, I will give you a discounted rate to come to the footy, or I'll give you a discount to do something else, or I'll give you a free pizza for all I care. There's ways in which you can do this to incentivize and energize a local community to become part of something bigger and better themselves. It shouldn't just be you. You'd want, in my view, we had the massive advantage that we persuaded a lot of the great and the good that this was a good idea. We also persuaded the Church of England, and I'm not necessarily that religious. I'm Christian, but I don't go every Sunday. But they saw the strong force in that, and they said, this is a fantastic idea. And my launch was held at Hexham Abbey. The Bishop of York came along, Archbishop Centenary came along, and we did joint comms together, BBC, ITV. We really pushed it out. And then I had a really good person helping me run it. And those people are gold dust, clearly. If it's all about you, then that has its connotations. The same thing about all the politics and the police stuff. Margaret Thatcher famously said, give me, I think it's the quote is something like, give me 2 or 3 good men and true, and I will then change the country. You need 2 or 3 other people. They don't have to be built in your particular mode, but they do have to be passionate about the local community, committed to the cause, and you'll be amazed. I guarantee you that there will be people who pop up and said, do you know, I did 30 years with Barclays, NatWest, HSBC. I miss old style banking. Can I help you?
What are the risks?
The risk is that quite simply your costs outweigh the
normal business stuff.
Yeah.
But is this,
or you don't get approved by the FCA and all those sort of things. Or bluntly, no one invests in you and you are running a normal business without sufficient people coming through the door.
I mean, but I can put up the seed capital for it to start. How long did it take with your bank to reach that kind of flywheel stage where you had people saving? There was enough capital.
2 to 3 years.
2 to 3 years.
Yes, maybe 4 to 5. So it's all singing or dancing. But also the journey is worth it, because the journey is, you are taking a multifaceted approach to trying to improve your local community. I've given you half a dozen ways in which you can potentially do that. One of them is ensure that people aren't falling through the financial net. And by the way, have something that they're proud of, which is a old style savings and loans institution in their local community that shows that in Bedford, we're doing things differently, right?
Okay. And why would they save with, say, this as opposed to any other bank?
Peer pressure, because bluntly, you're going, I don't mind if you have most of your ill-gotten gains or your justifiable gains with Barclays or BlackRock or whoever it is, but stick a couple of £100 in here because that adds to our capital base. We can then lend it out to the people who really need it. They will probably then to try and start a business, live a better life, spend their money locally. Hopefully we'll get our crime down for obvious reasons. If people have got no money and no access to finance, inevitably they drift into crime, a significant proportion. And we are taking care of our problems here.
It's just a solid community project.
Yeah, of course it is.
But it's a commercial enterprise as well.
Yes, it is. But it's also, there's no shareholders. There's no, as such, it's a mutual. This is a cooperative. There is, I don't think for the investment I've made, I still haven't received a dividend, but I would consider it as the money is still there. And it genuinely is something that it's a bit like the old adage. Do you give to charity? Most people will give to charity. This is a charity in your own local doorstep, which, by the way, will bring you massive things back.
I'm very interested. Okay. Is there a role for Bitcoin in this as well? You know my background.
Yeah.
And I consider that I would rather some people were just saving a smaller. If you're saving £100 a month, I'd rather you put £20 of that into Bitcoin. I want to talk to you about one of my sponsors, Incogni. And that means we're going to talk about the weird world of spam. And I don't just mean those spam emails that you get day after day from companies you never heard of and companies you've never signed up to. I'm also talking about those spam phone calls you get from those people who seem to know a little bit too much about you, trying to get your bank details. It's all a bit creepy, right? Now, this all comes from the world of data brokerage. There are companies out there collecting your data, building profiles, and sending that data to anyone who wants it, which is why when one of those scammers phones you up, they seem to know everything about you. Now, I've tried myself to get off these lists, try to get off the phone list, try to get off the email list. I unsubscribe from every one of these emails that comes in, but this game of whack-a-mole, it just never ends. And so this is where Incogni comes in. They do all the hard work for you. They reach out to these companies and they will get you legally removed from these lists. And I know because the last time they sponsored my show, I signed up and I didn't take the free option that they offered me. I wanted to pay for it. I wanted to see if you get value for money. And they removed me from 79 data broker lists. And so I've stayed on. I've stayed a subscriber and I have seen a massive decrease in the number of emails and phone calls I've been getting. So it's a great service. I recommend you check it out. If you're sick of this like I was, please head over to incogni.com/Peter and sign up. If you use the code Peter, you will get a lovely 60% discount. So that's incogni.com/Peter.
So I think yes is the answer.
The FCA won't like it.
I don't know actually, because the FCA are changing their tune and they've just authorized the first Bitcoin investment in a pension. I'm very interested in trying to see pension funds investing a share of their portfolio in Bitcoin. I think if you invest already in property, gold, stocks and shares, bonds, you should contemplate having something in Bitcoin. Now, clearly, like every single stock or share, it can go up or down. You can have crashes and things like that. But it's part of a balanced portfolio. It makes total sense. The bit that I think interested me with Alex and what he was doing in Africa was he was making development loans in Bitcoin on the basis that obviously in a highly inflationary world and in an unstable world, that was probably a more steady and stable currency to be in. And so the other thing is, why wouldn't you set up some sort of secondary account in Bitcoin? Why wouldn't you do some other capabilities in the world that you know really well and try and get, the follow on from what you're already doing is, I would be really, really curious if you were to persuade a head teacher to have a local savings bank in their school. And then there's nothing to stop you doing an after school work so that the kids in the school become experts in Bitcoin at a young age and actually have some proper understanding of what a token is, what cryptocurrency is. And then, wouldn't that be quite cool if Bedford became the place which was the hub for Bitcoin in the future, not just in terms of acquisition of the asset, but also in then creating alternative products, creating new businesses, creating etc.
Well, we're a natural home for it, with me being there and
the
Bitcoin Football Club being there.
Yes.
We are a natural home for it. And I've often thought that if I was to run for any kind of office, I would naturally reach out and try and say, look, Bedford is open for business for Bitcoin companies. Let's put your head offices here. Let's create a hub. That is something I am very interested in as well. But this
I would do that anyway, by the way.
Yeah.
So why would you not? You know, we're in a position that if you're in a mainstream office in mainstream cities, it's really expensive. Staff is really expensive. Community is really expensive. If I set up in Bedford and I have my office there, it's an awful lot cheaper.
So cheap.
And you could create a hub there, which would be really, really interesting. So my answer to that is forget about whether all the other stuff, do that anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's a lost leader as well. If you get a premises and you say, this is where it's going to be, some of the universities, I'm digressing slightly, used to have in the 70s a very cool thing. They'd take a really bright graduate and they'd say to you, and Newcastle did this famously, stay on for an extra year. We'll give you an office and we'll give you a little bit of money as a sort of development grant we'll sort of call it a master's stroke PhD, but in reality, go and build something, create something. And they allowed key students who they really thought something of to effectively go off and try and create businesses. And I met one of them in particular who set up an amazing business called Pearson's, eventually employed thousands and thousands of people, one of the biggest private sector employers in the Northeast. And he always said, if I hadn't have had that extra year's opportunity where I was given premises and told, you go and make things happen, I was given a little bit of support, I would never have done it. And also, by the way, they all then stayed in the Northeast, created businesses there. That sort of stuff you should be doing anyway.
Yeah. Becoming
a sort of enterprise hub and creating that in Bedford, very cool thing to do if you've got the cash to do it.
Yeah, and I've got a location I think I would want to do it in. We've got an old Debenhams that is empty. Three stories. One of those stories would be great for open up as a hub.
Yeah.
Be perfect for it. It's really interesting to hear you talk about this because a lot of MPs I've met, whilst they run surgery in their local community, are still very much focused on central government. I don't see much from our local MP in the community doing things. I know he runs the surgery, but it sounds like MPs can be a lot more active locally doing things.
The answer is yes. It is heavy lifting. I didn't have children at the time, which made life a lot easier in some respects. But at the same stage, it's like running a business. You have to kind of work out what are the 3 or 4 things you would like to do. It did take me 3 to 4 years to set up a bank from scratch when no one else was doing it, and I had to do an awful lot of legwork. It's easier now, there's no doubt whatsoever, but and I didn't have any capital behind me to say, right, I'll take this premises and here's $100,000 and everything like that. But at the same stage, that you work out what are the sort of 3 or 4 things you're really going to focus on. And setting up a community bank was one of the things I was really, really focused on. Rebuilding the 4 high schools that I had was another thing. That took me 11 and a half years. So that there's a plenty of time that goes with these sort of things. And it's not going to happen overnight in those respects. But you are doing a multifaceted approach to your community, of which there is a bunch of stuff that you can do, of which a mayor can do, of which local community organizations can do, that there's no doubt whatsoever.
Yeah, you're coming across as practical optimist.
Yes.
But it requires boots on the ground, roll the sleeves up, get things done.
Eventually, you either have to get a group together who get behind you and say, fine, we can run this project. So that's been the case with the Northumberland Community Bank entirely whilst I was a minister. Or you have to do most of the heavy lifting yourself. My advice to you would be the more that you can get other people involved, the better. And imagine you were to stick an advert in the local paper, the Bedford News or whatever it is, and say, former bank managers wanted. You would find 2 or 3 people would pop up out of the woodwork and say, I used to run the local Barclays. I used to run the local HSBC. I would love to try and do this. Or, that sort of stuff, it then becomes, wow. Because also, you don't need to do it anymore. You're going to say to these guys, You go forward. You know how to run a bank. I don't know how to run a bank. I know what I like from a bank. I know what the impact will be. Go and do it.
Well, we have this meeting on Thursday where, because of the private security initiative, which, by the way, mixed replies to. Some people are concerned about it. But I wrote like a letter to the people of Bedford, said, come and join us, come to this meeting, because I think we need teams of people. We need teams of people who run cultural events to bring people in the town. We need teams of people to work on beautification of the town. I could totally add the banking into the agenda. I could put out a message on Facebook today.
But then there's also that you could do. We had a really cool policy, which is called pocket parks. I love pocket parks because that was £10,000 from central government to local small places. I mean, tiny little, villages, literally, who could get 10 grand to greenify and improve their parkland areas. Even tiny little 10 by 10 little patches of green, stick a tree on it, put some flowers in, make it look a bit better. That sort of approach multiplied by 10 in various different ways. And so your 5-point plan, I think it is great. But I would also say it's not just that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, whether it is how much have you spent on your local community shops this week? Encourage people to keep an audit of that. Encourage kids to keep an audit of that. Do you volunteer for any kind of litter pick? Do you volunteer for any kind of community organization? Why is it? What are Rotary doing? What are the Lions doing? How are you partnering up with those? Because there are some of these organizations out there. They're just starved of help and leadership, and there's a lot out there.
Well, the way I see it is almost like we're trying to create a civic wave.
Yes.
I will spark. I'll create the spark, but it's a civic wave, and I think it needs to be decentralized. I've got no interest in building this. I don't know. Independent council, and I want everyone to come together and then and people just go off and do stuff. Just go out and get things done.
There's a degree to which, I'll go back to being sort of an elected politician for a second. So let the 1,000 flowers bloom works in the sense that if I say to Mrs. Miggins at number 43 Acacia Avenue, you go forward and do whatever you want, and she suddenly decides to be the key litter picker for Acacia Avenue, that's great. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I don't need to monitor you and control you and do stuff with you and everything like that. But at the same stage, wouldn't it be nice if there was actually a plan?
Mm-hmm. Fair.
And the plan is, there's 100 streets in Bedford, hypothetically, probably more. Who's going to clean which streets? Who's going to monitor which potholes are filled in or not filled in? And drive around and then give a hard time to the council and say why you're not doing this. That sort of stuff has massive impact.
Well, I had some guy write to me today. He said, I've got what was his business? I can't remember what his business is. He said, I've got lots of staff, engineering staff. Can we come? Can we join? Can we give a day a week, a day a month, and go out and fix things in Bedford? There is this kind of civic response that's happening.
And then there's a bit of trickiness. So I can tell you, if you go into, hypothetically, a local park and you fix a swing or you fix a bench, the local authority will have a pink fit because they'll say, who's going to be responsible for the long-term health and safety of that particular swing? Because that's not fixed by local authority. It's not governed by statutory insurance. Did you do a risk assessment before someone cut their hand on it? And that's where we've got really bogged down. Yeah. There's no doubt whatsoever.
Is that something you should just ignore and get on with, or do you have to liaise with the council?
I had a lovely group. That we have a lovely old bridge, a Victorian bridge called Wark Bridge, and Wark Bridge hadn't been painted for years and years and years. And there's a pub in Wark, which is a proper West Northumberland farming community with some very nice old codgers who meet on the Monday night and have a few too many beers and get out and about. And there were about a dozen of them, and they got fed up and they went and painted the bridge, which is obviously not their responsibility. It's not their bridge. It's a local authority bridge. And a furore resulted. And you can, made the papers. You can look them up. Wark, spelled W-A-R-K for those who are listening. And people said, oh, well, the paint will have polluted the river below, which has got freshwater, I want to say freshwater mussels and various other things below, and you might have killed them and everything like that. And it was all, you could have hurt yourself, and who's going to take care of that sort of stuff happens. And you will get people like that, and local authorities slightly have to clear up the mess, literally and metaphorically, because they dropped a bit of paint on various places. But here's the thing. Imagine you ran the local authority or were the mayor. Then you could actually then dictate what you could or could not do in that local community. Then you could say to everybody, it's fine. I think it's absolutely fine that, and I take it on my responsibility that these lovely people are going to help out. And okay, let's do this.
So maybe we need this independent shadow council, an independent shadow mayor.
You don't necessarily need a new infrastructure. What you do need is a bit of organization for someone to say, all right, if we're going to clean every single street in this town, right? Who's doing which bits? You tell me. Yeah. Who's going to take east, west, north, south? Who's going to coordinate that? If you're going to run a bank and you're going to rely on volunteers, who's going to be volunteers? I had a lovely shop in a village called Humshalf, which closed. And we managed to persuade the lovely Graham Wiley, who was a phenomenally successful businessman, ran a company called Sage and sold it, to give us some money. But there is a team of 60 volunteers who keep that shop open and running every single day for the last 14 years.
Amazing.
And they secure all the produce, they man the tills, they run the accounts, they sell local things, they order everything. It is a prize-winning, I made sure they won a Countryside Alliance prize for their shop. That sort of stuff happens. But there are 60 people, and there's a nice man called Dick Moore who was the organizer of most of that, and he had a schedule. And bluntly, who's going to open the shop on the Monday morning? Who's going to close it? Who has the key? Who has to organize the insurance because someone's bound to trip on a step or something? That there is a degree of organization, but you don't need a shadow council. You just need people who'll stick their hands up.
There's a real community spirit that can come together in these times.
Yes.
And I'm getting emails every day, messages on Facebook, people saying, how can I get involved? I'm going to be there on Thursday.
So, have you got a community shop? Have you got a local bank? Have you got a litter picking team around the place?
Yep.
How can you get, what are the projects that your nice engineer people could do? If it has to be on private land and you have to get the landowner's approval, fine. If it's it's more complicated when you're fixing national infrastructure or you're fixing bits and bobs belonging to the local authority. But again, have the local authority lead around and say, we propose to do this. And your nice engineer might have to say, I give the indemnity that I will build it to the appropriate things, and it's on me. All right, that's he'll understand that as well, because if he builds some sort of fence for you in your back garden, that's on him.
Yeah,
he knows that's the issue.
I'm feeling inspired, Guy. I'm feeling inspired. Is there anything we've not touched on that you wish we had of?
Tell me. Okay, I'm going to touch base with you because you are the king of Bitcoin, right?
Okay, I don't think so, but go on.
Well, many people would argue you are. Maybe. So, where does Bitcoin and crypto go, and how mainstream is it going to become? And if I am the former pensions minister, I'm advising a bunch of pension companies, do you think Bitcoin can and will feature as part of pension funds going forward?
Yeah, so good questions, big questions. So I'm much more focused on Bitcoin than crypto. I think stable coins perform a very important role in countries of high inflation where people are trying to exit their local fiat currency, but I'm mainly focused on Bitcoin. I think we are in a multi-decade period of refinancing the world, remeasuring the world in terms of Bitcoin, and that's lumpy and it's all over. It's distorted. The current trend is these Bitcoin treasury companies, which you've probably seen, that Michael Saylor first kind of created, and then lots of copycats, and people are concerned about those is like their large concentration of centralized Bitcoin. I actually think they're the banks of the future, personally, because at some point they need to do something with those Bitcoins. But my view is Bitcoin just goes up forever. As long as we live in a world of governments not paying off their debt, so really increasing their debt, more and more people will look for an alternative to inflation. And housing isn't a great option at the moment. And so Bitcoin is a very easy way to save £10, £100, £1,000, £10,000 and put it in, park it somewhere that they know in 10 years will maintain value. So I think that growth will continue. I think it's slow growth, which is good, but I think that will continue. For me, in terms of a pension company, it makes sense for 1%. I mean, the asymmetric opportunity with Bitcoin has been proven year after year after year. My expectation is that they're still fearful of it, because some people naturally are fearful of it. They may have some regulations around why they can't do it. But for me, it makes absolute sense that pension companies, I think some of them are doing it via the back door anyway, by buying things like MicroStrategy. That is essentially putting their money into Bitcoin in a way they can. What was the question regarding pension companies again?
So kind of, first of all, would they include it as part of a balanced portfolio? I think we agree, yes.
Yeah.
And secondly, the bit that I'm trying to work out is, if I'm a pension fund, how do I create... So long-term, I'll go back to my time in Africa recently and my chats with Alex. I was trying to persuade a lot of African countries and civic leaders to sign up to traditional savings plans, right? Mm-hmm. Bog standard stuff, what's called a defined contribution, auto-enrolled savings plan. Your business, your cafe will employ people and you have to pay them 8% as part of that. There's an auto-enrolled savings pot. Happy days. That's what we all do. We don't have mega inflation and we have a stable government. In Africa, they don't have stable governments in many places, and they clearly are grappling with, some places, rampant inflation, and in other places, very bad inflation or volatile inflation. And some of the people there were saying to me, well, I'd love to do long-term savings, but my money is not necessarily stable. And if I'm going to save in anything, I'm going to save into a cryptocurrency in some shape or form, Bitcoin. And the bit that flows on that is that's basically investing in what I would regard as a traditional stock and share, right? It goes up and down. You think it'll go up long term. Some skeptics say it'll go down. Fine. But that's the nature of the beast. How do I create a long-term savings product that builds up over time and then allows me to live off it, which is what we're doing with defined contribution pension plans nowadays. Mm-hmm. So the world is moving to, you save a large bunch of your present earnings, you then live off that having invested it longer term. How do I create such a product, probably using Bitcoin or an alternative currency, in a world where there is no other option in reality? And where they have massively burgeoning populations, where they simply cannot afford, forget about, and by the way, they don't have state pension. So they wouldn't have necessarily any fallback, what's called a Pillar 1 pension. Mm. You know, we have a situation where, you know, the state pays 11 to 12,000 state pension, come what may. Doesn't matter whether you haven't paid your national insurance, you get to retirement age, our state catches you and will look after you. It's tough to live off, but it is definitely, you can live off a state pension on its own. And a lot of people do. On top of that, you'd like people to have some private savings. Mm. In some of these countries, they have no state pension because the state doesn't provide it. So if they don't save for themselves in some product, then they will have no savings. How do you fix that? And for me, finding some sort of Bitcoin product that fits into a pension world rather than a straight asset you buy and hold is a really interesting prospect.
important that you don't lose this, okay? This is your inheritance through Bitcoin.
Let Bitcoin rip. Don't rip up your Bitcoin. Set up inheritance with Casa.
I still don't fully understand the question. You're saying, what does the product look like?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not somebody who's created financial products, but the asset itself is a pristine asset.
It is, but bear in mind, at some stage, I have to live off said asset.
Yeah.
So I've got to sell or invest it.
So in some ways, if you could,
because what I'm doing at the moment, what we all do, if you retire, you have a pot of money, either paid for by your employer or by yourself, which you then invest. You know, an annuity is such an investment, which pays you a salary for life, right? For the rest of your retired life. At the moment, that product is just not available to large swathes of the population. Okay, because they can't get savings in their own currency, because why would you save in a African currency that is devaluing by 30% a year because of inflation, or may not even exist in some period of time? And it's actually getting to your savings are getting smaller.
Is it a mixed stable coin, as in USD? Is it a mixed USD and Bitcoin basket?
Possibly. Some would argue, though, and one of the reasons that they put back to me was, traditionally, we'd all go into dollars, right? Happy days. I've now got dollars. Here's a slight problem. The dollar's fallen by 30% since Trump got in. It used to be the currency of global resort. It used to be the world's stable currency. Hence the clues in the name. But it's not necessarily going to be in the future. You speak to the Europeans, they're saying, oh, the euro is going to be the stable country. I think good luck with that, but
I don't think it will be.
So you're going to get it to a situation, which is great news for Bitcoin, by the way, where there is no stable currency. And that you go, well, that's absolutely fine, because we used to have the gold standard, then we had the pound, then we have the dollar. And it's possible, is it not, that in 30 years' time or 20 years' time, when you and I are in our dotage, the dollar will not be the force it was, that it won't actually be as strong as it has been for the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and some other currency or basket of currencies is.
Yeah, so I still don't fully understand the question you want me to answer, but I just think these people need Bitcoin. That's the answer. It's like, and I guess you're asking me what's the product, but is the product itself not just Bitcoin? These people just need to buy and hold Bitcoin.
They then have to live off that. So that at some stage, they then have to sell their Bitcoin.
Sure, but what's wrong with that?
And then that has created a regular return.
Well, so look, I don't have a pension, but I have Bitcoin. And so I know at some point, if I choose to retire, I'm going to be either borrowing against that Bitcoin to live off, knowing that the Bitcoin will outperform the interest rate on the loan. So I think what's the compound annual growth rate? It's like 30, 40% at the moment. And you, depending where you go, you pay 5 to 10% interest on borrowing, say, dollars or pounds. So if I can hold it for 4 years each time, historically, that would have worked out for me.
Yeah.
But is that an institution with a product that's doing that is constantly leveraging the Bitcoin base to pay out I think I see where you're going. So you create the product, people buy into the product, you buy the Bitcoin, they need a certain amount of money every month, which is paid in a local currency, and you're leveraging that Bitcoin to borrow that currency to do it. Yeah, look, it's the big risk is that always existential risk that you fear exists with Bitcoin. Like, what happens if it goes to zero? Or what happens if it fails? That always exists.
But then that's exactly the same with, frankly, all of our money in mainstream pensions is invested in the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And is invested in stocks and shares and bonds and gilts.
So the people buying it aren't necessarily knowing they're buying Bitcoin. They're just giving you money to go into a pot that provides a pension for them, but you can outperform the other pensions because if you hold Bitcoin, you know that's going to massively outperform everything else, as long as it continues to.
Or the alternative version is I buy Bitcoin and I then create, as you say, a basket from which I can then be paid in my local currency as I get to my older age.
Yeah.
And but obviously one hopes that the Bitcoin goes up in value to create more money to drift down and to pay out. But alternatively, that you then have a mainstream provider, hard to imagine in the Bitcoin world, but a mainstream provider, BlackRock are now getting into this majorly, who say, well, I've got this large basket of Bitcoin and you, Pete, you want to retire on it. Why don't I pay you this amount of money out of it in your local currency? That's where I think this is going. And I say I think because I'm trying to work out. I was faced with a simple problem. I have a large swathe of the population who don't trust their own earnings, their own currency, who don't have a stable country and want to be able to save long term.
Yeah, and if you created a product for them, you take away that custody risk of them custody in the Bitcoin, losing the Bitcoin, panic selling the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it sounds more like a Bitcoin bank in some ways. But if they've put,
it's more like a Bitcoin savings and loans institution.
That's what it feels like. It feels like
it's a Bitcoin pension fund.
Yeah, but if they've given you £50,000 over their life to go into it, and that would have acquired Bitcoin, and say at the time they retire, that Bitcoin maybe is worth 200,000. Yes, you could pay them a steady income, but at the same time, would they not feel like, well, that whole 200,000 is mine, by the way? Are you guaranteeing it till death and you're keeping the difference?
So you just described what is an annuity.
Yeah.
So at an annuity, I say give £100,000 to my pension fund.
Yeah.
Right. At retirement, I buy an annuity off of an insurer who says you're going to live to 94, so I will pay you $2,000 or $3,000 a year till you're 94. Right.
Yeah.
But they necessarily utilize the lump sum. Now, an alternative version of that is most people on this planet of the UK now are saving into a defined contribution pension, which means I get £100,000 of my own personal savings and some from my employer. So in your cafe or whatever, if they're auto-enrolled, they will be on 8% as a mix between you and the employee.
Yeah.
And they then have a pot when they retire and they go, here you go, here's your £100,000. You then have to invest that to live off for the longer term.
Mm-hmm.
There's no automatic investment that necessarily takes place.
Yeah.
Now, that principle, I apply that to places who don't have stable currency, don't have stable governments, and I try and work it out. And, we are basically reaching an agreement that some sort of bank / financial institution would hold it and then pay me out. And then you have a question and a debate. Do I get part of the Bitcoin paid to me every year?
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you've kindly kept it for me at a very low fee for a period of time and secured it so I don't lose it and everything. And then at the end of that, you pay me either the earnings from it and also a bit of the Bitcoin back. Question is whether then I can pass it on to my wife, partner, someone else's wife, and then who has the asset at the end of the day. This is the world of pensions.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, it's like when you've been trying to persuade me to set up the Bank of Bedford, you're actually thinking about the Bank of the World, of which anyone in any jurisdiction can use, and it is more of a savings bank.
It is, but so the obvious thing is savings. So Bitcoin is an investment by another form, but it is also a form of savings, right? Easy. The tricky bit is as I get to 70, 75, 80, and I possibly can't even manage my own affairs, I need money coming in.
Yeah.
How do I get that money if my only solution is crypto / Bitcoin? Now, there is a way in which you create, wouldn't be a bank as such, it would be a financial institution, what is traditionally called a pension company here, that stores it and then comes up with a product when you reach retirement that pays you it out.
Yeah.
That's where, so my take, so I am and your listeners will be going, he's misspoken on that particular point. I am Mr. Traditional Finance, right? Even though I set up a bank, I'm Mr. Traditional Finance because I was the UK government pensions minister, the longest serving one, who's Mr. Defined benefit, defined contribution, serious, sensible, always invest, right? I have gone a dramatic sea change.
Yeah.
And I now believe that there will be alternative products out there. The question is, what do they look like? Who's going to do them and how do they function? How do you regulate them if you need to regulate them as well? And what are the products at the end of the day? That is coming. Whether you and I create those sort of things are party to that. But it is patently clear if I'm sat in parts of Africa and I want a stable return on my retirement, we need to find a product for these people.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like you're trying to create anything different from a traditional pension. You're just more levered up on Bitcoin.
Correct.
Yeah, which is
the currency that lots of people are using and ever more people will use.
Yeah, and will become easier to understand and is easier to create an international product for.
Correct.
Because it's a international currency. It's a borderless currency. I guess it's how are they paid out? They hit retirement. Do they get a certain amount of Bitcoin each month, or do they get the value of that Bitcoin each month? Do you provide a guarantee on the amount, or do they have the potential of just massively outperforming any other pension because Bitcoin continues to grow so rapidly? Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I would. I mean, the thing I say to friends I've got friends of mine now in their 40s who don't have a pension, and I say to them, you're too late for a traditional pension. You're not going to be able to park enough money to get the kind of returns you want. Just stick it all in Bitcoin. For now, if you keep stacking Bitcoin now and for the next 20 years until you retire, I would say that's the most likely outcome where you're going to be able to have this base for you to live off in your retirement. Because I looked at it when I was 35, I think I was, and I was told I needed 2.2 million in my pension pot to have £40,000 a year to live on, which is what I want. They said, how much do you want to live on? I was like, I don't know, 40 grand a year. That would be, if I've got no mortgage, that would be good. And I was like, well, I'm never going to get 2.2 million into my pension pot. That's impossible. So yeah, I don't have a solid answer for you. All I know is that I think fiat currencies are going to continue to melt and lose value, and not only in purchasing power, but Bitcoin's going to massively outperform them because of the strict 21 million. So I would just tell people to go into Bitcoin.
That's a pretty good advice at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be interested to see what the product is you come up with. I'm not somebody who creates financial products. Well, I might be soon.
You will have a bank within a year.
Fantastic. I'm excited by that. You're going to have to introduce, what was her name again?
Lauren Langton.
Yes, you've got to introduce me to Lauren.
Works at a company called Incuto now. Very wonderful lady.
Yeah. Well, I've really enjoyed this. I didn't realize I was going to start a bank by the end of this, but I think I'm going to start a bank.
Yes, you are. And you should.
Appreciate your time, Guy. Thank you for coming in. Very inspirational chat. Thank you to everyone for listening. See you soon.